All right, let's take a look at HTML, the HTML element for creating tables. So there is a table tag that we can use. So table, within a table tag, we can create rows and columns. So the way that we organize the table is in rows first, and then we break up each row into columns. So let's create our first table row. So table row is a TR. And inside of a TR, inside of a table row, we need columns, and those are defined as TDs, or table data. So we can say TD. So we might say like this is column 1, and we might have another TD, like this is column 2. Okay, if we save this and refresh the page, we'll see this is column 1, this is column 2. It's technically in a table, but it's kind of hard to tell that it's in a table there. So one thing we might do is set an attribute on the table called border, and we can set that equal to 1. And that will give us like a little bit of structure around the border of the table. Now it's worth mentioning at the beginning of this that typically we are not using tables very much anymore when designing HTML unless it's really just like a table of data. Most commonly we're going to use divs and structure the data inside of divs, and then use CSS to style the table. So these are less common. It's a less common tool, but it's important to know. So we're going to use border so that we can see where the border is for the table. We have a TR and TD for one row. Let's add another row here. And in the second row, what if we just added a third column? So we have column 3, right? So if we refresh the page here, we'll see this is column 1, this is column 2, and then we have column 3 over here. But like this space, it's kind of awkward because we have borders between all of the columns except for this space over here has a border, but it's kind of like completely filled in. So one thing you can do is if the data for column 2, in this case, should completely fill all of that space, we might use something called call span, or how many columns should this data span. So let's see, I'll make a new row and I'll say this is column 2 and 3, and we're going to use call span, COL span. This is an attribute that we apply directly to the table data. So this is the column, and if we say this column span, or the column span for this table data is 2, then this column is going to span 2 columns, or this table data will span 2 columns. So if we refresh, you'll see this is column 2 and 3, and you'll notice that like this completely covers both columns 2 and column 3. So that's what call span does. There is a similar tool for row span. So if we wanted to like have some table data span across 2 different rows, we could do that. Generally, it's good practice. It's not required, but it's good practice to add headers to your table. So right now we don't have any table headers. We just have the data that's in the column. And yeah, so in order to add headers, we need a table row. And that's just like a normal table row, the same TR tag we're using for the headers. But the difference is instead of TD for table data, we're going to use TH for table header. So we might just say column 1 as our table header, and column 2 and column 3. And if we refresh the page, we see column 1, column 2, column 3. These are left aligned, or I'm sorry, these are center aligned, whereas the table data is going to be left aligned by default. There are attributes for controlling alignment and controlling a few other things, but again, generally we're going to style this stuff with CSS. Typically the data that's actually in the column is probably going to be just like some values, like maybe you have like this is your order, like order number 1, and then you might have some value for the order number, like order number 1, $1,000, right? So if we refresh, like this is the kind of thing that we might see. Another good practice is to group columns together within a head and a body of the table. So it turns out that like if you wanted to create your tables just like this with table rows and with all table rows, and maybe having some table headers in some of the rows and table data in other rows, that's totally cool and you can do that. But there is a practice where you can use T head, which means like table header. So you can separate the rows that belong in the table header from the rows that belong in the table body. So T body is going to be the table body. So if we move these rows up into the table body, that gives us some content that goes in the table body. And the table looks exactly the same, and you can style it. You can style it all the same way, but it's just it's kind of like a good practice to organize by grouping together those similar columns. All right, awesome. We're making good progress. Let's next head on to ordered lists and unordered lists and different kinds of lists. So we have three different kinds of lists.